Hello, and welcome to this webinar, Stop Collecting Patents, Start Building Leverage. My name is Ola Wassvik, one of the founders of Lightbringer with a 20-year background as a deep tech CTO. Lots of patents, lots of patent strategy, and I'm hoping to give you some high-level strategic business advice related to patents today. As always, remember that this is not legal advice. Even though I have experience from 300 plus patents, things can be different in your specific field, and you always need to have the right legal counsel. One of the key things that is often difficult for technical founders specifically to understand is that patents are not black and white. Patent strategy is resource allocation, and it's always under uncertainty. There are no 100% fully covering patents until you've actually taken them to court and proven that that's the case, which is something that you hopefully won't have to do. So even though you think you have the perfect patent filed, it is not necessarily so. And you need to think statistically about patents. During this webinar, there will be a lot of references to battlefields. And why is this? Well, because patents and military strategy are actually very, very similar. You have different type of patents. You have your map that you're working on. You have your competitors that are out there. And one of the things that is very important to understand is that you do not know your technological battlefield from the start. You will not know it completely until several years from now. And this is a realization that came to me far too late. I assumed that I knew everything, and by doing so, I made a lot of mistakes. And one of the things you can do to mitigate this problem is that you spread your defenses across different technological areas and different abstraction levels. And you don't double down on things unless you know that the ground you're standing on is actually valuable. This is probably where founders waste the most amount of money. They double down before they know they're sitting on gold. So let's reframe this from first principles. Quite often I hear from deep tech founders, what can we patent? Don't ask that question. That is the wrong question to ask. It creates random filings. It creates patent trophies that some engineer is very happy about. And it creates very, very expensive wall art for you. The right question to ask is, what business position are we defending? Let that sink in. It's the business position that you want to defend that should be covered by your IP, your patents and your trade secrets and your know-how. What this does is that it creates leverage, it creates deterrence, and it creates value and room to maneuver. Very different things from the what can we patent to what business should we defend. And make sure that you are always in the second camp. Otherwise, you will be making mistakes. So how do you get to know your technological battlefield? Well, you unfortunately have to fight a little bit so that you get to know the terrain. And the thing you need to figure out is, are there paths that everyone must take? Are there certain things that everyone just has to do? And are there areas that are easily defensible? So we're starting out with a blank map. And typically then you file a couple of patents. You do them in different technical areas, different abstraction layers. You're trying to get them in. But at this point, you have very little knowledge about what the map actually looks like. The map happens when you start delivering products, when you start seeing what competitors do, when you're figuring out these are actually the things that everyone has to do. And then the map appears. And what will happen, and this is specifically a map that I kind of drew from my own experience, is that some of the patents that you thought were very powerful are in positions where no one wants to go. That's just a fact. And some of them that you might not have thought as important are exactly spot on where everyone has to go. And the important thing is to file enough patents so that you get some in the right area that allow you to then double down in those areas. That's how you create a strong strategic patent defense. And you need to attack yourself. You need to find your own weak points. You need to calculate with the fact that certain key IP, including your patents, may be invalid. It may be that there was a Korean washing machine from the 80s, like in my case, where they have released a similar technology but had not patented it. But it was still on the market and we couldn't find it until we were actually in court. So you cannot completely rely on your patents. Even if your patents are very well written, covers exactly what you're doing, it doesn't mean that they're valid. So you need to statistically improve your chances. And you do that by filing more patents along more fields and more abstraction layers. You also need to try to work around your own IP. This is typically best done by an offsite where you take your key engineers, you buy them some nice food and give them a few beers and ask them, please try to crack what we're doing if you had $10 million. Because that's exactly what someone else is going to try to do to you. As soon as you succeed, a crack team of engineers will get $10 million to try to crack you. So you should be able to figure that out beforehand and make yourself more safe. So you need to figure out what are the workarounds you would use if you had to start from zero today with good funding. And what would you do in the shoes of your competitor? Another thing is that different patents have different jobs. Again, like in the army, you don't use your infantry for everything. You have different types. And this is the same thing in patents. Different patents have different jobs. Certain patents are about defense. Other are about licensing so that you can actually maximize the amount of licenses you will get out of your company. Some of them will be used specifically for getting the right investment at the right time. Some of them will be used in an exit. And in an exit, typically you file a lot of patents. I was about to say a bad word, but you need to file a lot of patents to get a good exit. And it's specifically for the exit. And what a lot of people miss, you use it as leverage in customer negotiations. So patents don't all protect your technology. That's why you don't ask, what can we patent? What technology can we patent? You ask, what business can we protect? And which type of patent do we need for a specific task? Another extremely important thing is patents versus trade secrets. If you're patenting all your great ideas, you're probably doing the wrong thing. If you're keeping all your great ideas secret, you're probably also doing the wrong thing. The truth is somewhere in between. You need to have a certain amount of patents, you need to have a certain amount of trade secrets. Generally, the 50-50 rule is a good way to start, but it's all dependent on how much money you have and what stage you're in. But patents should be used when reverse engineering is likely. When someone gets access to your product, and they will, trust me, your product will get lost in shipment, someone will get access to your factory, it will happen. So once they get hold of your product, what can they reverse engineer without having access to your source code? Those are the types of things that should be protected with patents. And you should use it when you see that competitors have to take the same route. That's when you really double down and you file a couple of extra patents around that one where you have already found value. And you use them for deterrence. You need to make it very dangerous to move close to you. And once you've identified a large piece of growing business, you file more patents there so you get better leverage. Because one of the things that patents give you is higher margins. Basically, the amount of money you make is relative to the amount of patents you have in the right area. If you have patents in the wrong area, they were zero towards that market segment. So trade secrets, on the other hand, should always be used when infringement would be hard to detect. So if you can't prove that someone actually copied your technology, don't patent it, because basically you're just giving them a blueprint on how to do things. You keep it secret instead, and you make sure that you have your trade secret logged in a good way. You should also use it for process and data and where execution actually creates value. There are many reasons to keep trade secrets and trade secret registries and not patent them. And you should clearly explain to the whole organization what is the IP that we're talking externally about and must be patent, and what are the things that never leaves the premises. You also use trade secrets when a disclosure, as in a patent, would teach the competition too much. So you can understand here, this is a fine balance. You're probably the only ones that can figure out which is which, and you need to use patents in the right way. Don't patent too much, don't patent too little. A thing that quite often happens is when someone thinks too early that they found their line of defense, and then they spend all of their money in that little area. And being deep tech founders, as you probably are, you're likely going to do it on the component level of your product. And I'm just saying this from experience, my own experience, and all of the companies that I've been advising. Engineers always start out on the component level because that's where you live. Business people start out on the conceptual level. So actually, one of the very underestimated things is to have your business people in your patent discussions on the conceptual level, because anyone who's interacting with customers or competitors should absolutely be part of patent. At the different abstraction levels, starting with the conceptual level, going down to the system level, how your product interacts with other products, down to the product level, how a specific product works, down to the component level, the things that you can reuse in multiple products. You should have coverage in all of those layers. And if you don't know where to start on the conceptual level, because it looks great for investors. And if you can get it granted, you have a massive advantage. Someone at some time will attack your portfolio, so you should be the first one to do it. You need to start asking uncomfortable questions early, because otherwise those uncomfortable things will happen to you down the line. So again, go back and check, where are we unprotected? Be aware of your weaknesses. Even if you can't afford to protect them, be aware of where you're weak and make sure that you keep even tighter trade secrets around your weak areas. And always assume that a single piece of IP will fail. A trade secret will leak, a know-how will get known, a patent will be invalid. And assume that it happens and have a plan for when it happens. With patents, basically it means that you should have more patents that cover similar things. With know-how, you should try to keep it documented so that everyone knows what they shouldn't talk about. Same thing with trade secrets. Don't have the entire company be aware of all the trade secrets. Keep it on a need-to-know basis and make sure that everyone is aware of what they're allowed to talk about and what they're not allowed to talk about. And what are the workarounds? I urge you every year to try to build your company again from first principles, to see, if we started out today, would we do something new and better because we're not bound by legacy? And if that is true, at least patent it so that the competition doesn't go in and do that. Maybe you can't pivot right now, but maybe you can pivot in a year or two and build that new and better product. But make sure you patent it first so no one else leapfrogs you. And always think about what your competition would do. And think about what well-funded competition would do. Because what will happen once you're successful, and this is important, when you're small, no one cares about you. But once you're successful, someone will fund a competitor. Because you found a market, you've proven that it's possible, and someone wants a piece of that pie. And don't spend your whole army, your whole budget on the first hill. Don't go in and say, okay, this is all the money we have, let's patent everything now. Because that means that once you develop your product and make better things, you can't afford to protect it. Make sure that you have a plan that goes several years in the future. Make sure that in every investment discussion, you are budgeting for your IP. Because as you grow, as you raise more money, you will need to spend more on patents and IP. And if you don't have that in the investor discussions, then adding it on later will be very difficult. On the other hand, if you have it early on, the investors will think, hey, these people actually know what they're talking about. They know that they need protection. Of course, we should give them money for it. And if you're spending too early, before you actually have product market fit, before you have a market, there's a high likelihood that you will have to pivot and your IP is no longer worth it. So what you should do, you should allocate across all areas and abstraction levels. You should keep reserves. Most of the valuable IP is things that you will develop close to the customers you're working with. So you need to keep money to actually start spending on that IP when it happens. And please stop spending on dead ground. What do I mean here? I mean, you patented something 5 years ago and you've already pivoted away and you realize that we're actually not going to use this anymore. Why keep spending on it? Well, you felt like, well, this was a really good patent. Don't keep spending on dead ground. That legacy backpack of expensive IP is killing your current IP. You need to protect the business, not the technology. And once you've found good ground, double down. The key problem that a lot of companies end up in is that they spread their defenses too wide. Even when they figured out what's important, they keep spending outside of that key area. Once you found critical good ground, you double down and you try to statistically minimize the risk of anyone getting through. You protect variants. You protect how it works with our systems. You protect implementation details in customer projects. And you protect adjacent commercial applications where you're going next. And you use continuations and follow-ons as much as you can, basically expanding your existing patents as much as possible. And patent strategy is not a one-time workshop. It should be typically done on a quarterly basis where you map, you decide, you file your patents, you monitor your competition, and you adapt to what's happening. And then the loop goes back and you keep mapping your terrain because since the last quarter, things will probably have changed. Thank you very much for watching this webinar. I hope it was useful. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions about patents, IP, running a deep tech company, or patent strategy.